My name is John Passfield, and I'm going to read from my novel in a moment. The title of this video is Eisenstein-Video for Battleship Potemkin. Here is the cover of the novel, Death Day, The Apology of Sergei Eisenstein, a novel by John Passfield. And I'll just read from the summary on the back cover, which is a summary of the whole novel. On March 19th, 1937, world-renowned Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein excuse me, appears before the All-Union Creative Conference of Workers in Soviet cinematography, accused of having failed to create films which reflect the social and political orthodoxy of the Stalinist regime. Reeling from an unrelenting barrage of questions, accusations, and threats, the filmmaker struggles to respond to the dilemma which is faced by all artists in totalitarian states: how to reconcile one's freedom of imagination and creativity with the conformity to the artistically stifling orthodoxy which is demanded by the rulers of society. His response is an example of the ingenuity which has often been displayed by artists in brutally repressive regimes. Now, there was an abortive uprising in 1905 against the Tsarist regime in Russia. Ultimately, it was put down by the Tsarist troops, but it became an inspiration for those who eventually overthrew the Tsarist regime in 1917. In 1925, the 20th anniversary of the failed uprising, it was thought to be appropriate to make a commemorative film about those events. In 1925, it was still early days for the communist regime. In the memory of the filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein, it was a time when all communists were equal. If a young filmmaker was a good communist and had a good idea, he was given artistic freedom and the resources of the new communist state and was allowed to make his contribution as an artist to the celebration of the new communist society. The result for Sergei Eisenstein and for the communist regime is the film Battleship Potemkin. I'm going to read from Chapter 8, Battleship Potemkin 3, whose topic is the filming of the story of the takeover of the Tsarist ship. Significant experiences become imagery in the mind as time goes by. In memory, for the main character of this novel, the making of that film becomes the ideal situation and ideal circumstances for the making of all films. The ideal expression of a work of art as a personal vision and as a contribution to one's society. Ultimately, it's an image pattern against which he can measure all of the other experiences of his life. Now, this is true of you and I. In my notes, I call these images touchstone images, yardstick images, measurement images, and other terms as well. An experience that we have that is really enjoyable and seems to be ideal is turned into an image, a memory. And then we measure other experiences of our life against that, against the ideal. Okay, let's go to the text then. Chapter 8, Battleship Potemkin 3, 1925. This is the filming. Other chapters deal with the planning and later the editing and so on, but this is the filming. The ideal situation for an artist, the ideal situation for any human being. Recreating the early days of the revolution, filming on the rebuilt deck of the battleship, the exhilaration of capturing the images on film. Still unsure of the balance between the patterns of the original story and the patterns of my own ideas, discussing the narrow range of available camera angles with Teese, walking through the scenes with my assistants, Alexandrov, Stoch, Antonov, Gomarov, and Lyovshin, talking things over and making changes to the script, making sure that we all know our tasks. The cry of the seagulls and the smell of the harbor air, hoping for a week at least of unbroken friendly weather. No smoking, no running, no unnecessary personnel on board the ship, never forgetting that the hold is filled with unexploded mines, feeding the tension of the real-life experience, interfusing with the drama as we proceed with the filming of the mutiny. Well, that's feeling the tension. Uh, the original battleship Potemkin had been lost. The First World War had been fought, of course. They found its sister ship. They had to rebuild the damaged parts of it. But it wasn't at sea. They weren't able to take it out at sea to film the at sea sequences. It was tied up to a dock. So there were hills in the distance that they had to avoid in the filming because the whole premise of the mutiny is that the battleship is at sea. Also, it had been used to collect these unexploded mines, and they had no means of cleaning it out, so they had to film on the deck of a battleship that had unexploded mines underneath them as they were filming. Explaining to Teese and Alexandra what I want for each shot. Inviting the sailors to listen in as I explain the idea. Inviting suggestions as we decide whether to repeat each shot. Taking the one-line notes from my film script and turning them into images exposed on film. The massacre on the steps, the raising of the flag, the lull during the day of the funeral, the approach of the boats, removing, adding, modifying, getting better and better ideas for the way that I will be able to cut the film. Filming on the wooden deck of the rebuilt battleship. The harbor is alive with the sounds of steam whistles and seagull cries, lining up each shot so we film only in the space between the crags. Lining up the sailors for the firing squad sequence, wanting the life of the film to surge up out of the crowd, aware that I must be alert for opportunities for changes to my design, alert to the possibilities in the people who march on the deck of the battleship or mourn the death of the hero of the mutiny, Vakulinchuk, or swarm the Odessa steps. Those are the people who will soon be watching this film. So making a film with the people, for the people. The perfect situation for this young filmmaker. Leaving out a few images, we go on. Toiling after midnight in the dining room of the hotel, sitting at a table with a samovar of tea, still unsure about the ways in which an historical pattern can be turned into the material of a personal film. So this is experience being turned into imagery again. Imagining the images which will convey the essence of my ideas. Each line of the script becoming a scene. Each scene of the story becoming a host of dynamic images. Each image interacting with those that will come before and those that will follow. Each image incorporating the emotions that have been generated by the close study of historical events. Lying awake in bed in my room in Odessa, thinking of the technical aspects of filmmaking, asking myself countless questions. By asking questions, I will find my way to the film. Realizing that the mind is a speculative instrument, that the mind of the audience will reconstruct the entire revolution from the details which are provided on the screen. Realizing that close-ups will be the key to this film, that the part will suggest the whole, that a fragment will suggest the entire, that a small gesture or element will convey an entire aspect of the revolutionary experience. The dining room of the hotel, too tired to eat my soup, forcing myself to take part in the cheerful chatter of the crowd at the table. Pleased that the art of filmmaking is such a communal event. Flopping into bed, exhausted, and waking up in the morning with my head teeming with ideas, eager to get out onto the deck of the ship and continue filming, even more eager to move onto the steps of Odessa and experience the realization of my ideas, while leaving out some of the images in the novel in this chapter, modifying my plans as we film, gaining confidence that it is instinct that will tell me what is right, talking to an eyewitness of the mutiny, deciding that in editing, I will move the timing of some of the events closer to what they are in his memory, thanking him for his suggestions, realizing that his recollections of the timing of the events will make for a much better film. Excuse me again. Realizing that the history must be treated as if it is elastic, realizing that flexibility is history's concession to art, deciding that our obligation to history is to capture our own ideas and emotions as we contemplate what it must have been like to be alive and passionate at that time. Accepting and rejecting ideas only on the basis of whether they convey my sense of history in the language of the medium of film. Making changes in the historical record, feeling more and more free to make the changes that will make a better film. Then leaving out some more images. Absorbed in my own ideas, considering that surely this is filmmaking at its apogee. So, filmmaking at its apogee, life at its apogee, that perfect experience, those perfect moments, against which to measure all the other experiences of your life to come. My friends, my society, my artistry have all contributed to the embodiment of my ideas. Anxious to see the filming through, realizing that chance and inspiration are needed to make the bare lines of the film scenario come alive in the spirit of the times. Leaving out more imagery and moving on. Directing the crowd on the Odessa steps, anticipating at least one whole week of people pushing and shoving in panic and trampling each other in their haste to get out of the way. Pushing, trampling, running, rolling, picking up and moving to their marks once again, falling in exactly the same spot every time. One whole week of the relentless tramp of the Tsarist troops as they pursue the frightened crowd, as they hurtle down the stairs. It will take at least this long to get every shot that I need. Excuse me, rough throat today. Searching for a boy who can fall. Visiting the school football field and watching the goalkeepers as they practice. Singling out one lad and arranging with the school and his parents for the loan of the boy. Putting an empty cigarette package down on the spot of the Odessa steps and having the boy fall down repeatedly. He smiles when I tell him that he might be needed for the 6 days that will be necessary to film our scene. Checking the sky for weather each day as we take our places on the steps. Antonov moving his people from one point to another point. Gomarov moving his people at an angle across the flow. Lyovshin moving his people at an angle determined by the changing setup of the camera. There were panicking victims charging down the stairs like raging water. Currents and countercurrents. Torrents and eddies and drifts. Each assistant wears a striped shirt in rehearsal, so I can see him lead his people through the crowd. Leaving out some more imagery. Directing the crowd on the Odessa steps. Bring the horses around again. Be a little more careful with those swords. Now, everyone, back to their places and start again. The crowd is angry and frightened and tired. The action becomes more real as the days unfold. Rolling on the hard stones over and over again, meeting the mounted cavalry when they get to the bottom of the stairs, reliving the nightmare of those who lived through the days of the mutiny, sensing that the crowd is reliving those days, feeling the nightmare as it will be experienced by the audience of the film. Well, more on filming the other scenes, but again, leaving out some imagery for this reading. Sharing bread and cheese with Teese on the camera platform as we pause for a midday meal. The extras sit and lounge on the Odessa steps while the football goalie practices falling on the cigarette pack. Filming at a record pace. Filming 75 shots in one day on the Odessa steps. Making art out of every item that comes to hand. Eager to maintain the pace of the filming. Asking Alexandrov to have the crowd repeat their frantic run with a little more fear. I can see that the extras are getting tired. Yeah, even terror, when repeated, can bring fatigue. Glancing at the sky, wondering what tomorrow's weather will bring. Glancing at my watch with the intention of keeping the mid-afternoon break just as short as I can. Well, skipping much more in the chapter on the filming, that ideal situation for the main character, Sergei Eisenstein. we move to this. A side trip at Tisa's insistence to enjoy the countryside. Riding along in a car, laying my head back, but unable to sleep. Enjoying the southern countryside. A chance for me to think about my film. Visiting the Alupka Palace. Tis drawing my notice to 3 marble statues of a lion. Sleeping, waking, rampant. Agreeing with Tis that they would fit wonderfully into our film. Well, there's a scene there where the groundskeeper at the palace doesn't want to let them film, he's in charge, and he hasn't had any word from the communist authorities to let these people do this, but I'm leaving that out. The last image of this chapter of the ideal situation in the life of Sergei Eisenstein, the filming of Battleship Potemkin. Leaving Odessa, returning back to Moscow, gazing absent-mindedly out of the window. Each moment presents a picture as we ride in the train. The rest of the film crew chatters away as I close my eyes. We have captured many wonderful images on film. We have filmed boots slapping the pavement, sails tugging against the sky, mist clinging to the harbor, a baby carriage out of control, and 3 marble lions in various poses. Eager to move on to the editing process, aware that it is in the editing that we will truly discover our film. How best now to edit these many disparate images into the single idea of a work of art? So that's the reading from the text that I'm going to do. Now I'd like to read a note that I made about the novel, and you can access my notes, and I'll tell you how in a minute, but first the note itself, or one of the notes. A battle for the mind of man. This is the premise of all my writing, and I think of all serious literature. In every novel, the main character is engaged in a struggle to harmonize the forces that impinge on his or her consciousness. Each main character is bombarded with a plethora of images, both threatening and flattering, repellent and attractive, from within and from without, from the past and from the present. Each character has to resist the hostile takeover of his or her mind from within and without, and can only counteract that threat by a healthy takeover or healthy maintenance of the self by the self. All of the elements of this novel, whether of films, events, or thoughts, of filmmaking, public trials, and relationships, of Russia, Hollywood, and Mexico, have been surface information which the mind of the main character has turned into the imagery that his mind hopes will allow him to be able to interpret the nature of life itself. Imagery works in our minds in interesting ways, sometimes changing meaning for us as circumstances change. The imagery of his film Battleship Potemkin is a layer of imagery in the mind of the main character, Sergei Eisenstein, that it is an image pattern which presents a hostile takeover of a naval ship by communist insurgents was pleasing to Soviet authorities when the film was made. That it is an image pattern of a hostile takeover might well have different implications to Sergei Eisenstein as he contemplates his life situation while he is on trial for unorthodoxy in the Soviet Union of 1937. So that's the premise of the whole novel. During the whole novel, Sergei Eisenstein is on stage at the Bolshoi Theater on trial for being an unorthodox communist filmmaker. And so it's 1937. So in his mind in 1937, what is this hostile takeover? Is it the takeover of Russia, of communism, by insurgents who have actually subjugated, I guess we could say, who have actually turned the revolution upside down? I'm ad-libbing here, so I'm getting mixed up on my words, but who has taken over what? What kind of hostile takeover is going on? And of course, the attempt here by putting him on stage and getting to apologize abjectly for being what he doesn't consider he is, which is an unorthodox communist. He thinks he's the ideal communist. That's probably every communist did in 1937 Russia. So they're trying to take over his mind by hostile means. Okay, the novel is Death Day, The Apology of Sergei Eisenstein, a novel by John Passfield. It's on Amazon, and you can find it there, and you can purchase it. You'll also find more information at my website. My website is johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield. I always write 3 books at a time. A novel, which of course is this one. I write a planning notebook. I start with the idea. I make records as I do research. I plan the structure, and I write until I get a rough draft. That's a planning notebook. If you go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, go to the top and click on notebooks, click on the Eisenstein icon, you'll get that entire book for free. Then after I finish, I take a month or 6 weeks to polish, and I write a journal of response to artistic creativity, repressive societies, communism, democracy, all the topics that occur to me as I'm reading over this novel and polishing it. And so that's a full-length book, and that's for free. If you just go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, click on journals, click on the Eisenstein icon, and there it is. So lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.